Imagine, if you will, the cool, damp earth of a spring day. The year is 1653. You are in the city of Tournai, a place that now sits within the borders of Belgium, a city with a memory of Roman walls and the weight of centuries in its stones. Your attention is drawn to a small plot of land beside the church of St. Brice, where a workman is digging. He is not an archaeologist, not a scholar, just a man tasked with clearing ground for a new building. His name is Adrien Quinquin, a mason who is, by all accounts, deaf and mute, a man who communicates with the world through his hands and the stone he shapes. As his shovel strikes something hard, he does not hear the dull thud that would alert another. Instead, he feels it's a vibration that travels up the wooden handle, a resistance that is not the familiar complaint of rock, but something else entirely. He digs with more care now, his curiosity piqued. The earth gives way to reveal not stone, but the crumbling remains of a tomb, a chamber long sealed and forgotten by the world above. Inside, a scene of unimaginable antiquity awaits. A human skeleton, that of a tall, powerfully built man, lies amidst a treasure trove of artifacts. This is not the simple burial of a local merchant or a forgotten priest. This is something far grander. What Adrien Quinquin has stumbled upon is a ghost from a world that has all but vanished from memory, a world that exists between the fall of Rome and the rise of Charlemagne. He has found the lost grave of Childeric I, king of the Salian Franks and the father of the legendary Clovis. To understand the significance of this discovery, you must place yourself in the mind of a 17th-century European. The grand narrative of France, and indeed of Europe, began with Charlemagne. He was the towering figure, the first Holy Roman Emperor, the father of Europe. The kings who came before him, the Merovingians, were shadows, figures of myth and obscure chronicles, dismissed as barbaric warlords, or, in their later years, as lazy, ineffective rulers. Their world was a dark age, a murky interlude best passed over quickly to get to the more glorious chapters of history. But the contents of this tomb told a different story. They spoke not of a primitive chieftain, but of a ruler of immense wealth, power, and sophisticated connections. And of Francisca, the iconic Frankish throwing axe, designed to splinter a shield or crush a helmet from a distance. These were the expected markers of a Germanic warrior. They spoke of a life defined by battle, by the brutal realities of a collapsing empire where power was taken and held by the strongest arm. But alongside these Frankish weapons were objects that spoke a different language, the language of Rome. A magnificent golden crossbow brooch, or fibula, exquisitely crafted, was a symbol of high Roman office. It was the kind of adornment a Roman general or magistrate would wear to fasten his cloak. There was also a signet ring, solid gold, and heavy in the palm. Engraved upon it was the image of a man with long hair, wearing Roman-style armor and holding a spear. Around the image, inscribed in clear Latin letters, were the words, Childerici, Regus, of Childeric the king. This was the seal of a man who was both a Frankish king and a Roman official. He was a foederatus, a barbarian leader allied with Rome, tasked with defending the northern frontier of Gaul against other, less cooperative tribes. He was a man with a foot in two worlds, the old and the new, the crumbling and the emerging. The ring was his signature, the tool he would have used to press his authority into the warm wax of official documents. It was irrefutable proof of his identity. The tomb also held a purse containing over 100 gold Roman solidi coins that spanned the reigns of several Eastern Roman emperors. This was not just wealth, it was a political statement. It showed his connections to the still thriving Eastern Empire in Constantinople, a sign that he was a player on the world stage, not just a local strongman. There was a crystal sphere, an object of mystery, perhaps a symbol of magical power or a tool for divination, hinting at the pagan beliefs that still pulsed strongly beneath a veneer of Romanization. And a golden bull's head, another potent symbol of strength and fertility from the pre-Christian world. But the most breathtaking and enigmatic discovery was something else entirely. Scattered throughout the tomb, sewn onto what must have been a magnificent silk cloak, were over 300 small, exquisitely detailed golden objects. At first, Chiflet and others identified them as bees, their bodies inlaid with red garnet. They were symbols of industry, of order, and perhaps of immortality. The bee was a creature that seemed to die in winter, only to be reborn in the spring. For a pagan king, what better symbol for the hope of an afterlife? Later historians would debate whether they were bees, or perhaps cicadas, another symbol of resurrection from the ancient world. Whatever they were, their presence in such numbers was unique. No other Germanic tomb has ever yielded such a find. These were not just decorations. They were a core part of Childeric's royal identity, a symbol so powerful that centuries later, another ruler of France, Napoleon Bonaparte, would adopt the Merovingian bee as the emblem of his own empire, deliberately bypassing the fleur-de-lis of the kings he had overthrown to connect himself to this older, more primal source of French power. The discovery of Childeric's tomb was a jolt to the historical consciousness of Europe. It was as if a locked door had been opened, revealing a room filled with objects that challenged the accepted narrative. The Dark Ages were not so dark, after all. They were a time of transition, of complex cultural fusion, where a Frankish king could be buried with his throwing axe and his Roman signet ring, with pagan symbols and Byzantine gold. Childeric was not a beginning or an end, but a bridge. His reign, from roughly 457 to 481 AD, was a masterclass in survival and adaptation. He navigated the treacherous politics of a dying empire, playing rival Roman generals against each other, fighting off Visigoths and Saxons, and consolidating the power of the Franks, laying the foundation for the kingdom his son, Clovis, would forge into the nation of France. For over a century, the treasure of Childeric remained one of the great collections of the French crown, housed in the Royal Library in Paris. It was studied, admired, a tangible link to the very genesis of the kingdom. But the story of Childeric's treasure does not end with its discovery. It has a final, tragic, and deeply ironic chapter. The treasure survived for over 1,000 years, buried in the earth. They survived for another 150 years in the care of kings and scholars, but they could not survive the chaos of revolution. In 1831, the collection was the victim of a daring heist. Thieves, interested only in the value of the gold, melted down most of the priceless artifacts. Only a few pieces were recovered, including 2 of the bees, found hidden in the mud of the River Seine. The signet ring, the brooches, the golden bull's head, and hundreds of bees vanished forever, leaving only the meticulous 17th-century drawings of Chiflet as a record of what was lost. The king had been found, only to be lost again. His legacy, once buried in the earth, was now scattered by the winds of indifference and greed. The physical proof of his power and sophistication was gone, returning him once more to the realm of shadow and text. What, then, could be made of a dynasty whose very foundation, whose first tangible proof, was as ephemeral as the treasure that announced it? The loss of Childeric's treasure in 1831 is a profound historical tragedy. But it is also, in its own way, instructive. It forces you to look beyond the glimmer of gold and the intricate beauty of garnet inlay. When physical evidence vanishes, you are left with the far more complex and often contradictory world of written records, with the echoes and shadows preserved in the chronicles of men like Gregory of Tours, who wrote his History of the Franks a century after Childeric's death. The treasure showed you the wealth, the status, the cultural fusion of a king, but the chronicles, however biased or embellished, offer a glimpse of the how this man navigated one of the most chaotic periods in European history to lay the groundwork for a kingdom. To understand Childeric, you must first understand the world he was born into. Imagine northern Gaul in the middle of the 5th century. The authority of the Western Roman Empire has not so much collapsed as it has evaporated, leaving behind a power vacuum. Roman generals, now effectively independent warlords, command what remains of the legions. Frankish, Visigothic, and Burgundian tribes, once held at bay or used as Roman mercenaries, now carve out territories for themselves. It is a world of shifting alliances, of constant, low-level warfare, a landscape where a town might be Roman one day, Frankish the next, and under siege by Saxons the week after. This was not a simple story of barbarians overwhelming civilization. It was a messy, complicated process of one system dissolving and another slowly, painfully taking shape. Childeric was the king of the Salian Franks, a tribe settled in the region around his future tomb in Tournai, but his power was far from absolute. He was one Frankish leader among many, and his authority rested on a delicate balance of military success, the loyalty of his warriors, and the shrewdness of his political maneuvering. The chronicles paint him not as a distant monarch, but as a hands-on leader, deeply involved in the messy geopolitics of the region. He is recorded as an ally of Aegeus, the Roman commander who established the kingdom of Soissons, a Roman rump state holding out against the Germanic tribes. Together, Childeric and Aegeus fought against the Visigoths, who were pressing up from the south. Think of this alliance, a Roman general and a Frankish king, fighting side by side to preserve a semblance of the old order, even as they both sought to dominate the new one. But their relationship was not simple. The chronicles also speak of tension, of rivalry. At one point, Aegeus is said to have become the king of the Franks himself for a time. This brings us to one of the most peculiar stories about Childeric, an episode that seems more like myth than history, but which reveals much about the values of his time. According to Gregory of Tours, Childeric was a man of excessive lust. He debauched the daughters of his own Frankish nobles, and his behavior became so intolerable that his own people drove him from the throne and into exile. He fled eastward, to the land of the Thuringians, where he sought refuge at the court of their king Basinus. Let's pause on this story. On the surface, it's a moral tale about a king punished for his personal failings, but buried within it is a more likely political reality. The debauchery may have been a convenient pretext used by rival Frankish factions to depose a leader who had grown too powerful or whose pro-Roman policies were unpopular. His exile was likely the result of a political coup. For 8 years, he remained in Thuringia, a king without a kingdom, waiting. Before he left, he made a pact with a loyal friend named Weometus. He gave Weometus half of a gold coin, keeping the other half for himself. The agreement was that when it was safe for him to return, when his supporters had regained enough influence, Weometus would send the other half of the coin as a secret signal. Imagine the patience this required. 8 years of waiting in a foreign court, relying on the hospitality of another king, never knowing if the signal would come. It speaks to a world of long-term strategy, of trust, and of communication through symbols. Finally, the day came. The other half of the coin arrived, and Childeric knew the time was right. He journeyed back to his homeland, where he was welcomed by his people and restored to his throne. The political tide had turned, his rivals had been outmaneuvered, and his authority was re-established. But the story doesn't end there. It takes another turn, one that is crucial for the future of the dynasty. Soon after his return, he was followed from Thuringia by an unexpected guest, Basina, the wife of his former host, King Basinus. She had, according to the legend, abandoned her husband and her own kingdom to seek out Childeric. When he asked her why she had traveled so far, she is said to have replied, "I know your worth, and that you are very strong. I have therefore come to live with you, for know that if I had known of any man more worthy than you, in the parts beyond the sea, I would have sought to live with him." This is a startling statement. Again, it is likely a story crafted after the fact, to legitimize the union, but it is a powerful piece of Merovingian propaganda. It portrays Basina not as a passive prize, but as an active agent in her own destiny. She is a woman who recognizes power and aligns herself with it. She chooses her partner based on his worth, his strength, his ability to thrive in a brutal world. This theme of powerful, intelligent, and often ruthless queens will become a hallmark of the Merovingian dynasty. They were not mere consorts. They were players in the game of power, forging alliances, controlling treasuries, and steering the futures of their sons. From the union of Childeric, the returned exile, and Basina, the runaway queen, a son was born. They named him Clodovec, a name that would be softened and shortened by time into Clovis. This is the true legacy of Childeric. He was not the great unifier. His son would claim that title. He did not create France, but he did something arguably more difficult. In a world of chaos, he survived. He built a stable power base, forged and broke alliances with precision, and managed to hold his people together through internal strife and external threats. He was the foundation, solid, unglamorous, but absolutely essential. He was the one who gathered the stones and drew the plans so that his son could build the cathedral. His tomb, with its blend of Roman and Frankish artifacts, was a perfect reflection of his life, a careful balancing act between two cultures, two eras, two identities. He was a warrior, a diplomat, a survivor, and a king who understood that in the 5th century, power came not just from the blade of an axe, but from the intricate dance of politics and the careful cultivation of myth. The treasure may be lost, but the man it represented is not. He is there in the chronicles, a shrewd and patient figure playing a long game. The story of his exile and return, of the halved coin and the queen who sought him out, became part of the founding myth of his dynasty. It was a story of a king chosen not just by his people, but by fate itself. But how does a dynasty founded by such a pagan warrior king whose legend is steeped in stories of lust, exile, and runaway queens transform itself into the primary champion of Catholic Christianity in Western Europe? The bridge from the pagan world of Childeric to the Christian kingdom of Clovis is the great, central mystery of the Merovingian ascent. The father had secured the land, but the son would have to capture its soul, a task that would require a conversion so profound and so politically astute that it would change the course of history forever. The true measure of a king, especially one who reigns in a time of chaos, is not found in the manner of his death, but in the state of the world he leaves behind. Childeric died around the year 481 AD. There are no dramatic accounts of his final days, no deathbed prophecies or epic last stands. He likely died as he lived as the powerful ruler of his domain, surrounded by the fierce loyalty he had commanded for decades. His death was not an event that fractured his kingdom. It was a seamless transition. The power he had so carefully consolidated over a lifetime of war and diplomacy passed directly to his son, Clovis, who was then only about 15 years old. This peaceful transfer of power, in itself, was perhaps Childeric's greatest and most underappreciated achievement. In an age where the death of a leader typically triggered a violent scramble for succession, Childeric had built a dynasty stable enough to pass to a teenage heir without collapsing. What, precisely, did Clovis inherit from the King? It was far more than a crown and a title. He inherited a formidable and disciplined Frankish army, battle-hardened and, crucially loyal to the Merovingian bloodline. He inherited a secure and strategic territory in the heart of northern Gaul, centered on the cities of Tournai and Cambrai. He inherited a full treasury, the kind of wealth you saw reflected in the gold and garnet of his father's tomb, giving him the resources to pay his soldiers and fund his ambitions. But most importantly, Clovis inherited his father's complex and carefully balanced legacy. Childeric had kept these two worlds, the Germanic warrior culture of the Franks and the Latin-speaking, Christianized culture of the Gallo-Romanzan, a delicate, parallel existence. He was the pagan king who protected Catholic churches, the warlord who used a Roman signet ring. It was a brilliant, but ultimately unsustainable balancing act. It was the inheritance of this fundamental problem, and the opportunity it presented, that would define the reign of his son. Clovis did not reject his father's work. He completed it in the most ruthless and effective way imaginable. Where Childeric balanced, Clovis fused. He took the two pillars his father had maintained and used them to build the arch of a new kingdom. Within 5 years of his father's death, Clovis marched his army south. His target was the so-called Kingdom of Soissons, the last independent Roman territory in Gaul, ruled by Satagrius, the son of his father's old rival and ally, Egypt. In a single decisive battle, Clovis shattered the last vestiges of Roman military power in the region. He did what his father had never attempted, absorbing this vast, wealthy, and strategically vital territory into his own. This single act transformed him from a regional Frankish king into the undisputed master of northern Gaul. It was an act made possible only by the secure platform of military and political power his father had bequeathed to him. With this new territory came a new challenge. Clovis now ruled over a vast population of Gallo-Romans who saw him and his Franks as foreign, pagan conquerors. This is where the second part of Childeric's legacy came into play, the cautious respect he had shown the Catholic Church. Clovis realized that military conquest was not enough. To truly rule this new, blended kingdom, he needed to win the hearts and minds of his subjects. He needed the administrative network of the bishops, the spiritual authority of the Church, and the legitimacy that came with being seen not as a conqueror, but as a rightful and Christian king. His marriage to the Burgundian princess Clotilde, a devout Catholic, and his subsequent conversion to her faith, the subject of our next story, was the masterstroke that fused the Frankish and Roman worlds completely. By accepting Catholic Christianity, he became the protector of the very people he had conquered, their king in spirit, as well as in fact. Now, let us return one last time to that tomb in Tournai. Think of its contents in light of what followed. The Frankish weapons, the axe, the sword, represent the raw power that Childeric commanded and passed to his son. The Roman artifacts, the signet ring. The brooch represent the political cunning and diplomatic skill that allowed the dynasty to survive and thrive. The Byzantine gold speaks to a global awareness, a connection to the wider world. And the bees, those 300 golden mysteries, can be seen as the ultimate symbol of the Merovingian project. They represent a hidden potential, a sacred legitimacy, and a promise of resurrection. Childeric's reign was the hive, carefully constructed and defended. Clovis was the swarm, unleashed upon the world, building a new kingdom with the honey of faith and the sting of the sword. The story of Childeric I is a profound lesson in the nature of history itself. History, as it is often told, is a narrative of grand gestures, of famous battles, of charismatic leaders who changed the world in a blaze of glory. It remembers Clovis, the unifier of France. It remembers Charlemagne, the father of Europe. But it often forgets the Childerics, the quiet foundation layers, the shrewd survivors, the managers of chaos. It forgets the long, slow, boring work of consolidation and preparation that makes the glorious moments possible. The discovery of his tomb in 1653 was a brief, startling interruption of this historical amnesia. For a moment, the world was reminded of the deep, complex, and wealthy world that existed before the celebrated rise of the Carolingians. The theft of his treasure in 1831, in a way, restored the natural order of forgetting. Childeric, deprived of his glittering artifacts, once again became a footnote in his son's more dramatic story. But his significance is not diminished by this. He stands as a testament to the fact that every great historical edifice is built upon a foundation that is often invisible. His life was a masterclass in turning weakness into strength, chaos into opportunity. He inherited the leadership of one tribe among many in a collapsing world and left his son the keys to a future nation. The true treasure of the Bee King was never the gold in his tomb. That was merely a reflection of his success. The real treasure was the stable, powerful, and ambitious kingdom he passed to Clovis. It was a legacy of survival, a political education in the art of the possible, and a dynasty poised for greatness. It was a treasure that could not be melted down, a foundation that could not be stolen. And it became the cornerstone upon which the history of France would be built.